let's see how we go. So we've got colleagues from all over. I see we're already reaching over 100 in terms of our attendees. So there's much more to join us, but they will join us as time progresses. So colleagues, today's session is just to firstly provide an orientation to you, as well as to get everyone on board on what's the expectations. You will note that your mics are mute now, and we restricted the mics because we'll open it up towards the latter part of it. Normally what happens is when colleagues start to join and they forget their mics and it's on, it might lead to some disruption. So to avoid the disruption, we mute the mics. But when we do our Q&A session, we will then open up the mics so that you can then feed into the discussions. So colleagues, let me start firstly by welcoming you to the Unisa Tutor Development Program. We really thank you for being selected as part of your colleges. We also thank you for taking the opportunity to join the training. But above all, I think more strategic than anything else is the opportunity that you have to provide a strategic level of student support to our students. As you know, one of the main challenges for us at Unisa is to close the distance between the institution and students. Unisa, as you know, Unisa has students all over the country, but also all over the world. And added restrictions by the COVID cause us to rethink a lot of the student support elements that we have. And this project is actually a DED funded project where DED has given us a grant amount to build the capacity of our tutors, specifically for two reasons: to increase throughput and student retention, and secondly is to build the competencies of our students to function more effectively in a digital domain, specifically in Unisa's open distance e-learning environment. So this is where you come in terms of building the capacity. So part of this program is also a reskilling for some tutors that may have been in the system for 5 years or 6 years and done previous training. This offers a reskilling of tutors in the system. So you would have received an email from me, colleagues, explaining what you need to do and how you need to engage with the course. But I'm going to take you from the base, from starting, so that you also get an understanding of what the course is about. And for those that have not yet registered on the online platform, this will also be an orientation for you as well. So let me log off. So I'm hoping you can see my screen. Richard, my screen is visible?
Yes, Tenzo.
Thanks, Richard. So colleagues, the first thing that you need to do by now, I see many of you have got already about 200 or so participants already on the MOOC site. So this is very positive for us. But if you have not yet joined the MOOC site, this is what you need to do, right? So you will receive the email from me with the link where our courses are, and that's https://mooc.unisa.ac.za. So when you get onto the site, this is what you will see. This is our Unisa Open Learning Portal, right? And this is another project that I coordinate as well. And on this portal, you will find, okay, colleagues, I see there are some colleagues that are texting me on the WhatsApp saying that the streaming is a bit low. So what I can ask is, please, can you switch off your cameras? Because if you switch off your cameras, it gives us better broadband width, right? So switch off your cameras. When we have the Q&A session, then you can open up again. Okay, so thanks, colleagues. So when you log onto the website, onto the https://mooc.unisa.ac.za, right? You will then need to create your new account. So you simply click on new account, and it then takes you to this particular page. Now remember, this Unisa Open Learning site is a site that is open to everybody. Anybody in the world can log on and do some of the Unisa open courses that we have. You then create your own user ID. It can be anything that you want. Just remember what the user ID is. Fill in your first name, your last name, your email address. You create your own password, right? So the password means that you create your own password, whatever it can be, numbers and a symbol. Just make sure that you remember your user ID and your password. Those are the two most essential things for you. Once you finish it, you click on create account, and then your account is now created, right? Then you can simply log on, and as I show you when I'm logged on, you simply create, once you logged on, that means you now have access to the portal, right? So I log on myself. Okay, I said network is a bit slow even on my side as well. Yeah, some of you have been having challenges with the network, and the reason why we're having some challenges with the network is because of the large number of students that we have on the site. Okay, so once you're on the site, Okay, so once you're on the site, you simply click on the course, which is BTODEL1, and you need to join or click on membership. And when you click on membership, choose this course, and then you will join this particular course. So BTODEL1, that's the code that you need to look for, right? If you have any challenges finding this course, just drop us an email and we will guide you through it, Richard and myself. But that's the course that you need to register on, right? So it's BTODEL1. That's code. The title of the course is Basics E-Tutoring. So when you get on the course, colleagues, you find that this is what the course looks like, right? The first page you'll have an overview, which tells you a little bit about the course. It tells you what the learning outcomes are, etc. On the right-hand side, you have announcements, right? So this particular platform is exactly the same platform where you will be tutoring students on the My Unisa platform. It's slightly different from this in terms of the branding. But if you're familiar with this platform, you'll be familiar with the Unisa learning platform as well. So you'll find announcements, and this is where we post up, myself and Richard will post up announcements. And the announcements are generally there to help you. Like, for example, today when we had the webinar, I quickly, before we could start the session, post up the link for those students that were on the webinar, and they can then get the link. So the announcement section is where we want to communicate something quickly to you. Beside the WhatsApp group that you all have joined, you can also click on the announcements on the course, and you can then follow the announcements as well, right? Then you'll also find the calendar where we will post up some important dates. If we need to, we'll highlight the dates, and you will then find the chat room, right? The chat room is where you can then quickly communicate with us. So it's similar to WhatsApp. It has a synchronous and asynchronous approach, meaning that you can communicate immediately with us. If we are online, we will respond to you immediately. If we're not online, we'll respond to you when we see the text, right? So the chat room is also on your left-hand side of your screen. You'll find a whole lot of tabs, right? So you got calendar tab, announcement tab. If you click on announcements, it's exactly the same thing here. It takes you to the announcement section. We have the honor code. All our courses have an honor code, and the honor code basically tells you what you need to do as a student in terms of, and this is basically aligned to Unisa's regulations. A getting started video, exactly what I am doing now in terms of orientating you to the platform. You'll also find the getting started video does the same thing for you, right? So you use a getting started video that Richard created, and the getting started video just provides you a orientation to how to navigate this platform. Now, colleagues, your course content, right? So all your course content, everything that you need for this course is on the site. We then have these types of webinars, which offers an additional level of support for you, as you will see now. So the webinars is a space for us to discuss the content with you, to show you what's happening with the content, engage with some of the critical points that you need to reflect on in terms of that particular study unit, but also offers us an opportunity for you to engage with us with questions that you want and get clarity on. But you need to engage the content, and this is why we started before we could actually have the first webinar. So we've given you time to actually orientate yourself to the content, navigate the platform, and work towards this, right? So on the left-hand side, you will see study unit 0, which is the orientation. The role of the E-Tutor is study unit 1 in ODEL environment. Study unit 2 talks about pedagogies in ODEL environment. Study unit 3 then talks about social and experiential learning. Study unit 4 then talks about the online learning environment, specifically the learning environment that you will engage in as a tutor, and it helps you to orientate yourself to that, right? Then study unit 4 will talk about the tutor walk at Unisa and what you need to understand about the Unisa environment, right? And study unit 6 is where we have the conclusion, right? So we have an additional resources section as well, where you will find any additional resources that we put up, such as web links to good podcasts, good videos that we think can benefit you, plus open course materials such as open textbooks. You'll find under additional resources. Then webinar recordings, colleagues, is where you'll find recordings of some of the past courses or last year's courses that we ran. And you will also find, for example, the recording of today's session. Richard will post it under the webinar recordings with the date. So if you find that you want to recap some of the stuff, you simply click on the recording link. It'll be uploaded as a YouTube video, the link, And you can rewatch this as well. So if you missed this, if you have a connection problem, you can't see anything through, please log on to the webinar recording site and you can rewatch the recording of these sessions. And photo gallery is where we take some of our photographs, like for example, some of the workshops that we had last year. And if later on towards the end of this, we'll ask you all to put on your cameras and we may take up a photograph of today's session as well. And then community of practice, you can also use a community of practice space to share some of your reflections on the course. You'll find some good reflections of other colleagues as well. So if you want to send anything on a community of practice, please feel free. It's a space for you to engage with fellow peers and engage with people in this network. And as I said, there are about, if I recall right, there are close to 300 people that are participating in this particular cohort, right? Okay, so then we've got the forums. The forums is where you post your discussions and you can engage with colleagues, but more specifically where you will be posting up your assignments, right? So this is very important. I'll show you how to do that as well. Then we've got the chat room facility, which I spoke about. And then Gradebook, colleagues, is where you will get your marks. So Gradebook is where you will find all your marks. Specifically, when we mark your sections, you click on Gradebook and it'll show you your assignment 1 mark, your assignment 2 mark, your assignment 3 mark, your assignment 4 mark. So this is where you will find your marks. Now, this is why, colleagues, we don't ask you to email us your assignments, right? We ask you to simply submit your assignments online. And when you submit your assignments online, it allows us to mark your assignments online, provide the immediate feedback to you as we mark it, and capture your marks on the system. So you don't need to wait for everyone to finish to get your marks. You get your marks as you submit, as we start grading it. So this is the online platform, colleagues, and this is the system that we work with. At this time, I'm just going to show you quickly the forum section. I'm going to enter the access view so you can actually see the forum section as well. So you'll see this is the gradebook. So this is what you will see on your system, right? You will see your name, gradebook report 4. In this case, it's an example, which is my gradebook. And then you'll see assignment 1 mark, your assignment 2 mark, your assignment 3 mark, your assignment 4 mark. Each of these assignments are out of 10. And then you have your portfolio assessment, which is out of 60. And you'll see your complete grade here together with comments from your facilitators, Richard and myself, right? So this is how you can evaluate and weigh your marking out, right? And then you'll have a final course grade here. And remember, the pass grade for the course is 60% and above. So you need to achieve 60% and above to qualify as an e-tutor at Unisa and to pass this course successfully. So now let's go through the forums. I'm quickly going to show you the forums. And the forums is where you will then post up your assignments. So for example, this is assignment 1, assignment transactions. Now, for example, if I click on if I see the introducing yourself activity, you'll find that 108 people have already completed it. And as we move on, it shows us the number of people who have actually completed the activities. So if you want to upload an assignment, it's quite simple. You simply click on the link and it takes you to portfolio. There are no postage here at the moment. You click on start a new conversation. The title of it, you can say, for example, portfolio assignment, and just put your name next to it. And then all you simply do is you add your assignment or your portfolio as an attachment and click post, right? Then all it does is simply captures it on the system, like you will see for assignment 1. For those that complete as well, you'll see assignment 1. It shows us the name, it shows us the date and time, and this actually allows us to audit the system more strategically. So we know exactly when you submitted it, what time you submitted it. So in this way, we keep track of every submission that comes into the system. And as you can see, it gives us a complete profile and date of when you have submitted your assignments. So this is how we monitor from an administrative perspective, colleagues, so that it's transparent and you know that we can only see what is submitted and captured on the system, right? So let me start with study unit 0 orientation. So orientation, so colleagues, this is what the course will cover, right? So basically, as I mentioned in the welcome, you find the purpose statement, the MOOCs, how it's designed, specifically enhanced competencies of e-tutors, etc. The MOOC syllabus, so you have 5 study units, right? 5 study units that you have to complete. And in this 5 study units, you have the following themes. Understand the role of an e-tutor in ODEL environment, which we will start with tonight. Apply basic pedagogical skills in an ODEL environment. So this will be the next week 2 session. Week 3 session, our seminar in week 3 will be designing social and experiential learning experiences for an ODEL environment, online environment. Then week 4, we actually talk about understanding the online learning environment and applied competencies in the use of basic teaching and learning tools. And then study unit 5 is actually a self-paced activity for you to go through to understand the e-tutoring work within the Unisa environment. Study unit 5 is actually very much in terms of who to contact, where you're going to contact strategic people, and how the system works itself, right? The delivery mode, colleagues. So normally, if it wasn't COVID time, we will deliver an online course, and then we also had face-to-work workshops in the different regions. So we actually traveled with a group of teams throughout the country in the different regions, and we augmented the training with work face-to-face workshops as well. But as you know now, it's become a bit more restrictive for us in terms of COVID, as well as the protocols and that are applied to COVID in terms of capacity of people, number of people in the space, and this worked against us. So if the restrictions are later on in the year lowered, and it allows us for going back to regions, and you'll find that we will visit the regions, and we'll also invite you to come back to our sessions and join some of the sessions for building up further capacities as well. Then the online training sessions using Teams, this is what we are doing now, and this will build us up to the team session as well. So what do we aim for you to achieve as part of these trainings, right? So we want to create a very good, excellent class of tutors that can provide strategic support to our students. So your skills, so this is what you'll learn, right? So firstly, to demonstrate an understanding of the role of an e-tutor in an ODEL environment, right? Secondly is apply basic pedagogical skills in an ODEL environment. Thirdly is to design a social and experiential learning in an online environment. Fourth, demonstrate an understanding of the online learning environments and applied competencies in the use of basic teaching and learning tools. And 5, understand the e-tutor work in ODEL environment. So these are the learning outcomes of this course. As you will see, the course was initially designed for 8 to 10 weeks, right? And this is where we 8 to 10 weeks in the sense that the assessments were much more extensive, and it was mandatory for all the learning activities to be completed. Now, because we reduced the time to 4 weeks, 4 weeks boot camp, we reduced the assessments to much more lower number of assessments, and we also made the learning activities non-compulsory. All we ask is that you complete the baseline assessment, the post-course assessment, and the course evaluation. The rest of the learning activities you can work at your own pace and respond to that. Prescribed materials, colleagues, all the learning materials of this course, as I said, are available on the site. We do not prescribe any additional information. Anything that you need is on the site. If there are readings, it's on the site. Then we also have a reminder app which we use. It's a free app that you can download on your phone, and we use that to communicate as well. Now, the reason why we use the reminder app plus WhatsApp is because not everybody likes to engage with WhatsApp. There are some people who prefer to stay away from WhatsApp. To ensure that we communicate with everybody and we have everybody on a level of communications for us to push notifications to, you are also free to join the reminder app, and it's quite a nice app, as you'll see when you engage with it, right? Assessment structure, colleagues, I will go through the assessment structure. So you have 4 online assessments and 1 portfolio. The formative assessments constitute 40% of your final mark, and the 60% of the final mark is your portfolio. Now remember, you need to complete all 5 assessments, right? So you can't just complete your portfolio, and you can't just complete the online assessments. All 5 activities, the online assessments plus the portfolio, are compulsory for completion. If you miss one, that means you do not complete the course, right? You need to attain, as I said, 60% to complete it. So the course facilitators will be myself and Richard, who is also will be the co-facilitator, right? Then introduction activity, you would have introduced yourself in part of this activity, and here you find an interview where I interview Prof. Mashile and Prof. Matuwane. Prof. Mashile is the executive director for the Department of Tuition Support and Facilitation of Learning at Unisa, and the director of the Instructional Support and Services, Prof. Matuwane, form part of this. This video actually provides you to a very good understanding of the tutor development program at Unisa, but more specifically understanding what is the purpose of the tutor development. And the tutor development program at Unisa is, we call it the integrated tutor model, ITM, right? So you'll hear these words, these phrases a lot in our conversations. So integrated tutor model, and the word integrated means that it is not seen as an ad hoc aspect of our training. it is integrated into the entire teaching approach that Unisa has, right? And this is why we call it the integrated tutor model, right? So watch this video, colleagues. It actually provides very good context for you. And then this is the video that Richard did on navigation. So if you cannot access it on the side, please click on this link as well, and you can actually see how to navigate the forms. So colleagues, then we have the baseline assessment. So we have a baseline assessment and a post assessment. Remember, I told you earlier that this is a DEd project, right? And a DEd project means that as a DEd project, you need to have stats on the impact of these causes. So you will find as part of the evaluation, we have a baseline assessment where you simply complete your and rate your skills and competencies right at the beginning. Now, this is not simply to trick you or to see that whether you have the competency or not. It's simply for you to weigh your competencies at the beginning, right? So you rate your competencies at the beginning, and then you have the exact same assessment at the end of the course, right? The idea here is to see that the course is actually, at the end of the course, is to see your level of growth, right? And this level of growth allows you to track, to say, I was rated myself, for example, 3 for my understanding of ODEL, but by the time I finished the course, I have 5. So that shows a growth of 2 points on the scale, right? So that actually helps you to navigate this as well. So John Abrams asked an interesting question: is this course credit bearing? So colleagues, this course is not credit bearing. None of the short learning courses at Unisa are credit bearing, but the course is designed at an NQF level 6. NQF level 6, if I'm right. NQF level 6, that's correct. So the idea here, colleagues, is that the course is pitched at the NQF level 6, but we don't have credits for it. While we don't have credits for it, you will receive a certificate for the course, right? Because remember, all courses that are offered by the Tutor Development Project are registered with the Short Learning Program unit at Unisa, which is the unit for the Center for Lifelong Learning. So on successful completion, right? I'm stressing this. On successful completion of the course, you will then receive the certificate via the Center for Lifelong Learning, and it will be issued to you by that center. And as I said, you can then use that certificate as part of your professional development. And I know there are some, in our last cohort, there were some teachers who also used it as part of their professional development points as well. So you're free to use that as part of your certificate. And that, as I said, that's the institutional certificate that you'll receive for successful completion of the course. Okay, so this is study unit 1, colleagues, study unit 0, orientation. Please familiarize yourself with this. This is very important. I know in the WhatsApp group I've had some questions. Please, can you explain to us how this course works? Colleagues, this study unit 0 provides that orientation to you. So this is why it's very important that you actually go through study unit 0, familiarize yourself with what's happening, and get an orientation to the course. Okay, so thanks, colleagues. So now let's go to study unit 1. So study unit 1, colleagues, is where we now start engaging specifically with the content for this particular week, right? So the first study unit talks about understanding the role of an E-Tutor in ODEL environment. Now, in this study unit, you will need to demonstrate at the end of study unit, this is what you should be able to demonstrate in terms of competencies. To understand the meaning of what we talk about an ODEL institution at Unisa, right? So ODEL, colleagues, is we use this concept, open distance e-learning, right? Open distance e-learning. That's a concept that we're using. Then we will also discuss the role between an e-tutor and a face-to-face tutor. Now, as you know, at Unisa, we have e-tutors that function online, and then we have face-to-face tutors that presented at the different regions as part of the additional level of student support that we offer to our students. Now, this is where we need to, okay, somebody sent me a text saying, hi, Chetty, we received an email informing us that the tutorials are starting tomorrow. Does it mean we'll be doing the course currently with student tutorials? Colleagues, I'm not too sure. Oren Tambo, I'm not too sure what you mean by informing us that tutorials are starting tomorrow. We can discuss that in the later on in the Q&A session, right? But for what we're discussing now is the online training. This training started last week, Thursday, and it goes on right till the 22nd, right? We'll talk about student tutorials at later. Okay, so demonstrate an understanding of ODEL in an higher education institution, distinguish between an e-tutor and face-to-face tutor, then differentiate the institutional context, and this is quite important, is understanding what it means to be an open distance e-learning, and what it means to be in a contact university. The reason why we are discussing these two elements is because there are a lot of people who are part of our groups that may have worked in a contact-based university, and they come in now to Unisa to work in an institution that is open distance e-learning, that does more online collaborations, right? So we need to differentiate in between those two contexts because the expectations of student support are different in those two environments. Then demonstrate an understanding of the profile of students in ODEL institution to unpack what does it mean to be an ODEL student in ODEL institution. Then identify the roles of an E-Tutor. What are the expectations for you as an E-Tutor? And then explain the difference between teaching and tutoring, because remember, colleagues, you are not teaching, you are tutoring. And there's a difference between teaching and tutoring, a fundamental difference between teaching and tutoring, right? Explain the difference between teaching and tutoring. And then last is to process and evaluate information on matters pertaining to the relationship between the E-Tutor and the module lecturer. So we'll unpack that a bit, right? And then you find the key questions, which basically relates to some of the learning outcomes. So your required readings for this study unit, colleagues. As I said, you'll have readings as part of this. The first reading is by Olmberg, and he talks about the evolution principles and practices of distance education. And there's two links. The one link is directed, and this is an ebook which you can download. Obviously, we don't refer to the entire ebook. We're only referring to pages 13 to 36 as part of this reading, right? So you can download this. If the first link don't work, I found a second link that's also available to you now. And I've tested that link just before the site, before we start the meeting. So that link actually works as well. The second reading is by Moore. Moore is one of the grounding theorists in terms of distance learning. And he talks about transactional distance. And you'll find that we use this concept a lot, transactional distance. What does it mean when we talk about transactional distance in an open distance learning institution? Right. So these two readings form the basis of what you need to engage with, right? Now, let us unpack some of these concepts, right? So you will need to look at all these concepts, right? But I just want to run through some of the key concepts. You need to look at the content, but I want to run some of the key concepts that you need to engage with, specifically as you start engaging with the learning space, but also as you start engaging with Unisa. So you need to understand what distance education means, right? And distance education obviously talks about the distance between the university and the students, but also it's much more wider than that, right? It also talks about different places, physically separated from the learning institution, tutors, the role of tutors and teachers as well as students. So this idea of what distance education comes quite critical for us, right? Secondly, we talk about open distance learning. So open distance learning, ODL, right? So ODL, open distance learning, was the business model of the Unisa before it could move to open distance e-learning, right? So what is the difference between open distance learning and open distance e-learning? Both have an emphasis on the student-centeredness, both have an emphasis on flexibility, scalability, etc. The difference between open distance learning and open distance e-learning is that when we move towards an e-learning model, there is an expectation for students to embrace technology more robustly than they did in an ODL environment, right? Now, this means that, and this actually came quite strongly, you would see in the COVID, where the entire country started to embrace technology more strongly, right? So ODEL means that we expect our students to engage with technology, right? So there's an expectation from our students to engage with the learning management system. Now you may say, but why do we expect the student to engage with the learning management system? Because the learning management system means the central space where all the learning takes place. And in this case, we call it My Unisa, right? So why do we expect students to engage with that? It's because that's the central space for all the content. That's the central space where the students engage with their academics. And that will be the central space where you as an e-tutor engage with students as well. So we encourage students to say you must use the learning management system as your central space of learning, right? Communication between the key stakeholders, communication between your peers as well. So this becomes quite important, is that there is an expectation for our students to integrate and actively participate on the online platform, right? But it goes beyond the online platform as well. And as you will see when Richard starts to unpack as the weeks go on, there are other tools that also forms part of the learning approach as well, right? And then Contact and face-to-face learning is, as I said earlier, the face-to-face learning where you have participants, instructors meeting, some in regions that may meet face-to-face with students and engage with students. Now, in this case, you won't meet face-to-face. You use the learning management system as your mode of delivery, right? But obviously, you would also be able to use technology to mediate your communication with your students. And we will touch some of those key tools, such as using of Teams, which is like what we are using now, which is a type of online meeting tool, plus the My Unisa has what we call a blue button meeting tool as well. So there are a variety of tools that will be used, that will be shared with you as part of these 4 weeks that we engage with you on how you could enhance your communication with your students, right? Then, colleagues, we use the notion of blended learning. This for me is very important that you understand this. Is remember, in the South African context, we must be very specific. We must be very conscious of the fact that there are students that are also impacted by the socioeconomic factors of our environments. There are also students that are far removed from the central spaces where they have access to learning centers, regional centers, and technology communication may also be at inadequate for them in terms of connectivity. So blended learning means that we incorporate a multiple and variety ranges of teaching and learning strategies. This includes a range of technologies, face-to-face interaction. This was before COVID, and hopefully after COVID, we will go back to some of these elements. And then also a deployment of both physical resources. When we say physical resources, colleagues, we're talking about print-based material for some of these courses, right? So this is what we mean by blended, is bringing in different modes of delivering our teaching and learning, okay? So when we talk blended, we mean, unless we say fully online, it means 100% online. When we talk blended, we must always keep in mind that there are students that are using multiple modes. And the good thing about this, colleagues, is our My Unisa platform, which is the learning management platform we'll talk about a little later in the next point, is also mobile compatible. That means students can access it off their mobile phones. Then My Life. My Life is the official Unisa account we use to communicate with our students, and this is an email account that we use for students. Now, previously we had academics and we had tutors communicating with students on maybe on their personal Gmail addresses, etc. The university has moved away from that, so we only communicate with students using their My Life accounts. Right? It's very important that we do that, and that's part of the POPI Act, the Privacy of Public Information Act, but also to ensure that we're communicating with the right students and we're not communicating with people who are not registered at Unisa. So the My Life account, all students, when they register at Unisa, they must activate their My Life account in order to even get access to the My Unisa platform. This means that they need that email account, and you need to also stress it to them when you get onto the platforms, because that becomes your immediate mode of communication with students, right? And the platform is also linked to that as well. Then we talk about tutoring, ODEL, etc., online and e-learning. Now, colleagues, when we talk about e-learning, it's just an umbrella term that is used to broadly talk about the different aspects of learning that takes place on the online environment, integration of technology, etc., right? The last concept I spoke to you about, I mentioned earlier, integrated tutor model. Here we talk about integrated tutor model, which sees both face-to-face offerings and e-tutoring systems. And I'm saying face-to-face was before the COVID. Post-COVID, we might go back to that. We went to the university on decisions on that, right? But it sees a variety. Now, this is why we also talk about is that integrated tutor model talks about creating presence, breaking the distances out, and creating a bridge between that bridges geographical distance and allows our students to benefit from the tutoring system. Now, this is where, colleagues, let me talk about your role and why we see it important for you. Tutors are a very important part of the institutional system, right? And you may say, well, why do we need tutors in the system? For two reasons. One is that we know that in a culture in South Africa, in a culture in Africa, creating social experience, and you'll see in study unit 3, is a very important part of the entire learning process, right? Firstly. So it means that as a tutor, you bridge the distance between the institution and the student. You serve as a medium between the institution and the student. Now, why I say you serve as a medium between the institution and the student? Now, remember, Unisa has courses that are large courses. And when I talk about large courses, mega courses, I'm talking about 20,000, 30,000 students in one particular course. Total population, total student cohort of Unisa is 350,000 plus. Some courses are large in some disciplines, 50,000, 30,000, 50,000 students, which means that it is impossible for one academic to have communication constantly with 30,000 students. You can imagine that is a nightmare, right? But that should not stop us from creating a presence. And this is why the integrated tutor model brings you in as tutors to then say you bridge the gap between the academics and the students and provide that middle ground for contact with the institution, right? So this is where it is very important that you understand your strategic role. You're not just coming in to say, oh, okay, I will just help my students or whatever. No, you have a very strategic role in the institution to close the gap between the institution and the students, bridging the academic part with the students. And this is why we see you as a very strategic part of the student support system, right? Then, colleagues, we talk about what is distance education, what is distance learning, and we unpack some of those concepts, right? Now, here we talk about the distance learning as rapidly growing, and we know that if you're familiar with some of the discussions in higher education, you know that okay, I see some of you are having problems with your connection. Colleagues, it's not a problem. Try your best to be with us. We will also share the recordings a little later, but I know that the weather could also be affecting you in your different regions as well. And I see some colleagues have problems with electricity. It's understandable, colleagues. Okay, so let's get back, distance learning. So colleagues, now when we talk about distance learning, right, it's becoming one of the most growing ways of delivering tuition globally, right, for different reasons, right? And one of the ways, okay, so we know in the South African context that the white paper allows even residential universities now to even offer distance education. But why is distance education more important in our current era? Is that we know that we've embraced the fourth industrial revolution era, which is talking about a rich technology integration, a more robust integration of technology. And if you know anything, if you followed carefully the minister's, the president's address last year, he spoke about the need for us to embrace the fourth industrial revolution, right? When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about the reskilling, building up the digital competencies, building up the technology competencies for a new workforce. And this is why distance learning is becoming quite interesting as a way to build up and a response to the changing learning environments, changing labor environments as well. This means that when we graduate students at Unisa, we can't graduate our students without building in the technology competencies in them as well. Now, I'm stressing some of these points because you will find that even as a tutor, you will come across students who are lacking some of these competencies, and you will need to refer them to different support systems inside the institution to build those competencies in order for them to function effectively in Unisa ODEL environment. Now, these skills are interesting because it defines how we see Unisa or how we define graduateness at Unisa. Now, many of you may have jumped onto the Unisa website, but you may have also just missed it and said, okay, this is the Unisa website and went straight to your college. I would actually encourage you to go to the Unisa and look at Unisa webpage and look at About Unisa. There are some strategic elements that defines who we are, what we are, our mission, etc., that guides what we mean and how we define graduateness at the institution. That also provides a background for you to understand the changing environment at Unisa. Okay, then your activity 3, and I mentioned these activities, all right, colleagues? So what I would actually suggest that you do is go through some of these activities where you find that you can complete the activities quickly, complete the activities, because the way the course is designed is that each activity builds you up towards the assignment question at the end of the course, right? So the first activity talks to about, you need to read the article by René Barocci and Bozobon, which talks about theorizing distance education, right? And the link to the article is there. And this talks about unpacking what we mean by student support. Now, remember, you function as a tutor in the domain of student support in teaching and learning, right? So it means that that's the strategic space where you work, you will engage with the university in terms of student support, right? Then the second activity is where we talk about the articles, the 2 prescribed articles, and I start to unpack that, right? Now, we then start to move towards institutional context. And when we talk about the institutional context, colleagues, we talk in the South African context, we talk about two types of institutional context. The traditional or conventional learning environments like your UKZN, UWC, UCT, WITS, UJ, etc., where you have the face-to-face sessions, you have the classroom environments, you have a timetable where students come in, go for particular lectures, meet up with their fellow peers, and then engage in those learning environments, right? A very supportive environment, much more integrated, much more interactive in terms of how we deliver tuition. And then you have the distance learning like Unisa, right? So the difference between both those environments is the level of student engagement in these spaces. Now, I'm sure many of you may already know this, towards the latter part of last year, the minister called for an audit of Unisa in terms of mission drift. And one of his arguments of mission drift was Unisa was losing focus of what it was a purpose for in terms of being a distance learning institution and delivering distance education. Now, you may ask yourself, why mission drift? Now, let me put you this way, colleagues. Over the past 10 years, we've seen the student profile change drastically at Unisa. During registration time, if you come to different regions, and I'm giving you an example of typically of the main areas in Pretoria in terms of Sunnyside campus, etc. When you come to Sunnyside campus during registration times, before COVID, you will find students, tons of students, thousands pitching up daily to register at Unisa. But they will pitch up with their luggage. So they'll come to Unisa carrying their luggage, their bags, and around the central areas of Pretoria, Sunnyside, Arcadia, there are students from Unisa that are now basically renting out these flats right through and accommodation areas. This sees a complete shift from where we see students staying in their locations and engaging with studies from their locations. They're now moving to the cities to engage, to get to the cities, and now are participating from the cities in these institutions, which means that on a daily basis, we're now seeing students pitch up, for example, in the Sunnyside areas, into the library centers, into the lecture halls, etc. And we're seeing a shift from what Unisa should be in terms of distance education to now having more student activities on the particular campuses itself. That makes us to rethink the way we perceive distance education. But this is the thing, colleagues, is that while we have students at the universities, and we need to also understand why they are coming to the universities. And for me, this is quite critical, is a lot of students are coming to the university to tap into some of the resources that are available to them. So, for example, the free Wi-Fi that is available to them to connect to teaching and learning, the easier access to teaching resources, etc., library services. These are some of the challenges that forces us to rethink what we mean by distance education in the South African context. We can't take it for granted anymore that it's the rural student firstly sitting in a tree somewhere in a rural area trying to access Unisa. That argument no longer is valid at Unisa. Secondly, there is no longer the argument at Unisa to think of our student profile as the more mature student that is working and also studying at Unisa part-time. We're seeing a younger cohort come into the institution, a younger cohort in the sense those that have just graduated, finished their grade 12 metric, that didn't get into residential university are now getting that education at Unisa. And this is where you will notice that the students went to court to fight for that other 20,000, which the minister forced Unisa to reduce. We now offer that 20,000 as well. So that actually shows you that the complexity of Unisa's institutional environment, which means that you need to have this in the back of your mind. The changing dynamics of Unisa, the changing dynamics of the student profile, as you start to engage with your students from different areas, right? Then you'll find an interesting an interesting video on teaching online versus face-to-face. And this article unpacks the limitations and benefits of distance education together with the strategies that are used to counter the limitations, right? So look at this video, colleagues, these two videos, they're actually quite interesting, and it unpacks some of those elements that we just spoke about. The next one, we talk about Unisa's context, ODL to ODL, right? For those of you that are following me, I see there's quite a bit that are following me online as well. So good work, colleagues. So here, these are stats from 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and you can see the student enrollments. 350,000, 354,000, 2016 dropped a little bit, 350,000, 2018, 381,000. So you can see large numbers of students. So these are stats from 2018. So you can actually see in 2018, we don't have the 2020 stats as yet, but once you get the 2019 stats, 2019, 2020 stats, we can update this for you. But this gives you a good idea of in 2018 where the large number of students were. You can see the colleges. Chems with 70,000, education, SEDU is a college of education. So College of Agriculture Environmental Studies, about 11,000, College of Accounting Sciences, College of Education, SEDU, 116,000. You can see how big this college is, right? Second to that college was Chems with 70,000, and you can understand why these are two high colleges because of the great demand in our country for teachers and the market corporate economy advantages of chems, right? Next was CHS with the humanities, social sciences. Then College of Law with 57,000, CSET with 20,000. College of Graduate Studies is where we have the postgraduate studies, masters and doctorates with only 259, quite small. And then the 1629, which is Graduate School of Business Leadership, and then occasional, which is includes some of the non-degree purposes, etc. Right? So you can see that these two colleges are quite large, right? And you can see these large colleges are where we have a lot of the large modules and now start to talk about the number of students that we need, tutors that we need, tutoring support, etc. Okay, so that gives you a good idea of the stats, right? Then we move towards, as I said, we moved towards from open distance learning to open distance e-learning, and we brought in the integrated tutor model. Now, the integrated tutor model is grounded on what we call the social constructivist approach. You'll find this social constructivist approach in study unit 3 when we start to unpack, in the next study unit when we start to unpack pedagogies. Okay, the social constructivist approach talks about learner-centeredness, firstly, bringing the learner to the center of how we teach and learn, but it also puts emphasis on the role of the student in terms of the student voice, in terms of how we design teaching and learning. And this is why you need to understand that the role of the tutor is to facilitate the learning process. You don't design content, colleagues, right? You're not designing new content. That's not your role as a tutor. You will get the content already designed by your academics. Your primary lecture of the module gives you the content. You simply then facilitate the learning process around that content, which means designing learning activities to engage that content, design, for example, MCQ questions or discussion forums to allow students to engage with the content. So there's a difference between this, and I'm stressing this. You do not design content, you design learning processes and implement that learning process to facilitate the learning on that content, right? So that's why you see your role as a tutor in the system. Then there's an activity on understanding the ODEL environment. And here we've got an interesting conversation that happened between Prof. Moketsi Letseka. He owns the ODEL chair at Unisa. And he facilitated discussion with myself and a few other academics, together with one of the executive deans at the College of Human Sciences, deputy executive deans. And this conversation was quite interesting because we tried to unpack for you, what does ODEL really mean at Unisa? Many people use this concept, but there's no clear lack of understanding it. But this particular video tries to unpack what do we mean by ODEL? And the emphasis here, colleagues, is on technology integration. And you found that in the COVID time, colleagues, there's no better case study to talk about this than last year, because last year actually challenged us. They pushed all of us out of our comfort zones, including academics, in terms of how we see technology, right? Then you talk about profiling the distance learning student. Right. And now this is where you need to really start applying your minds, colleagues. What does it mean to be a distance learning university student? And here we unpack a little bit about the characteristics, right? So some of these distance learning students, now these are broadly speaking, right? So we tried to unpack what it means to be a distance learning student and drew from different universities throughout the world. But generally, these are the principles. So these are general characteristics and implications, right? So let's just unpack this, right? So generally, the perceptions are that these are adults with busy lives, family, and work commitments. But also keep in mind that I told you that the changing profile of the distance learning student also includes younger students that are come from grade 12. And in many cases, those grade 12 students that are now coming out of finished grade 12 and come to the university, some of them are also working to supplement their income as well while they are studying. This means that there is little time for learning. Some of them have other commitments that may disrupt their learning schedule as well. And this is why you always find students asking for, please, can we have an extension on these assignments? Or please, can you give us? So this is part of the environment. This is the thing about distance learning, colleagues, is that even as a tutor, you need to understand this, is flexibility. If we are not flexible enough for our students, we can be so rigid sometimes and say, due dates, finished and done with. If you don't supply by those due dates, it's finished, right? And this is why you will also find in this course, right from the beginning when you started, I spoke to you about flexibility. We accommodate, right? And this is distance learning environment, is to accommodate because life happens. There may be a death in the family. There may be a loss of a job in the family, etc. So this allows us to accommodate, be flexible, but not the same flexibility to the point of where we disrupt the entire system, but flexible to understand that these are students in a system that is completely different, right? Usually have clear goals for learning, more commitment to achieving the goal and continue the learning if at all possible. Yes, that's true because they understand the value of the learning. But this is the other thing, colleagues, is that while distance learning students are goal orientated, we need to build that skill in our students. Why I'm saying goal oriented? Because remember, some of our students, a large percent of our students are coming simply out of grade 12 into the university system. And now watch this very carefully, colleagues, is that in the schooling system, they are literally spoon-fed a lot of their elements. And I know one of the biggest problems for us as academics is that when students come into the university system, the very first downfall mistake that the students make, and one of the things that work against them is plagiarism. And you ask, well, why plagiarism? It's because when they're in the school system, they are taught to give back exactly what they learned, exactly what they engage with, and pass it. Now they suddenly come into a university system and say, no, we don't want you to give us verbatim what the textbook says. We want you to interpret it. Now, immediately you see the gap that exists between the schooling system and the university system. So that means while we talk about goal orientated, we also have a level of skills that must be built into our students, right? This goes to the second point, the third point. They may have been away from formal learning for some time or may have come from a schooling system that doesn't bridge the university gap. This means that we need to orientate them, colleagues, to the learning process. What do we mean by academic writing? And this, colleagues, actually surprised me a lot, is that some of the colleges use very strongly essay writing, paragraph essays, etc., paragraph questions, etc. And we find that there is a lack of skills for these students in terms of writing essays and constructing essays, etc., right? So this means that we have a problem in the system. If we want our students to function effectively, we need to build the skills, academic writing, research, use of library, etc. And added to that, colleagues, and one of the things that I found that is most important for us is time management. Students can't manage their time. They don't know how to manage time, right? Now you imagine a student comes straight from grade 12 into the university where they had a timetable and could manage it, now coming into university where they are doing 5 modules for the semester, a whole lot of assignments, a whole lot of readings, and they don't know how to manage the time. So this is also part of your role of a tutor, is to ensure that students start managing their time. And you'll find towards the end of this course, right to the end, the output of it is that you will develop a tutorial plan. The tutorial plan will guide you in understanding how students should manage their time, right? Then next point on, they may not be able to reach libraries and other academic resources. So how do we address some of these issues? How do we ensure that they have access to the regions where they can access the library services, access to the Unisa system to understand how the online library facility works, how to access the e-resources, etc. That's part of how we build the skills, right? Then they are often interested in the implication of their learning for their life and work, and may need some orientation to formal learning processes, as we said earlier. And these are some of the implications and characteristics of our students, right? Now, added to that, colleagues, and this is to complicate things a bit more, is the digital literacy level of our students. A lot of them are tech savvy when it comes to mobile devices. They know WhatsApp, they know the social networking spaces, Facebook, etc. But they struggle with making that crossover in using these tools for academic purposes. And this is where we find some of them even talking SMS languages in the discussion forums, etc. Right? So These are some of the challenges that you need to start thinking of as a tutor. Start unpacking in the back of your mind. If you're working in a institutional environment, you're now working with students. You're now working as a bridge between the university, between the academics and the students. Think of yourself as a supporting role with these different hats that you will start wearing in terms of building the capacity, building the skills of the competencies, beside the fact of teaching the content, right? Then you need to know how students learn. And there are 4 learning theories which we will later unpack in the next study unit on pedagogies. But the 4 learning theories that have dominated the past decade or past few decades in terms of how we learn. Behaviorism, talking about how students learn in terms of change in behavior, etc. Cognitivism, learning through internal process of information. Constructivism, remember social constructivism I spent earlier, which we talk about, and this entire tutor development project is built on that, is we construct our own knowledge of the world based on individual experiences. So this is very important for me that you understand this, is that we try to bring the student voice to the center of our learning processes. So throughout the teaching and learning process and the way the academics develop their content, you will also find that constructivism talks about a much more inclusive approach in our design. That means your tutoring must also be built on bringing students to the center, their voice, giving them space to build on their knowledge, share their experiences as part of the process, right? And then connectivism is more than modern theory that has come out with George Siemens' Connectivism. And here he talks about learning that occurs through connecting. Now, what is important for us here is connecting to what, colleagues? Connecting to different nodes, what we call nodes of information, spaces that students can access information. And this is where we talk about the skill of managing information so students don't become overwhelmed by too much of information. So that means they can log on to Google and search on what does it mean to be in an open distance e-learning, but get overwhelmed with information and not know how to manage the process. So while we are talking about technology integration, we're talking about connectivism, connecting to resources. We also talk about connecting to different students and building up peer-to-peer learning support systems as well. All this forms part of the teaching and learning environment, right? The major theories that you will unpack, and this is actually quite interesting to read some of these theories, right? The idea of independence and autonomy, students working on their own, the industrialization of teaching, and interaction and communication. So look at this and unpack some of these things on your own, right? And then there's an activity on learning theories, and you can watch these 2 videos on learning theories and to unpack those elements, right? Now the role of the tutor. What is your role as a tutor at Unisa? Now this is what we talk about right at the foundation. If we get this right, colleagues, as we start moving on to the other study units, it helps you to unpack what your role is, right? So now, a tutor is essentially an educator. That means you are, in inverted commas, providing an academic support level, right? Who gives individual or more often relatively small group instruction. Now, why we say individual as well as small group is, remember, as a tutor at Unisa, you will be grouped with, now this works, depends on the college that you are in, right? You may be grouped with 250 students, which you will engage as a group. Some colleges may have you choosing 2 groups or 3 groups or 1 group, depending on the college. But there are some colleges where there are limited students and you may have an even bigger group of 500 students, right? So it depends which college you are attached with. It depends on the size of the courses. That will define how many students you are allocated to as a tutor, right? Now, what you will then do is facilitate that learning process with that students. Think of yourself as, I'm a tutor. If I'm given 250 students in this class, this is my class. I teach this 250 students, right? So you are now tutoring 250 students, which are part of your group. Your responsibility as a tutor is to ensure that they can understand the content, they engage with the content and not leave the content for last minute. And this is why you now start developing tutoring plans to break the content up for them. You will also provide a level of support for them to complete their assignments, their assessments, etc. And then you will provide a level of support for them to prepare them for the examination. Throughout this entire process, you are in contact with the academic, the primary lecturer, who then guides you through the process of how you tutor your students, right? You still have some freedom, but the academic, the primary lecturer, is your main point of contact for this, right? So why did we introduce the introduction of the integrated tutor model? is to minimize what we call transactional distance, the distance or the learning distance between the student and the university in which learning takes place. That's transactional distance, the distance between the student and the university in which learning takes place. Now, transactional distance speaks about geographical location, how far the students are from the university, can be in Cape Town, can be in a rural area, can be in Durban, but that's distance, right? Secondly, it also talks about inclusivity, because remember, we have students that are differently enabled as well. And this is also something that we will touch on in the other study units. How do we design tutoring environments that are inclusive, that ensures that a student who is differently enabled, for example, deaf or blind, does not feel isolated from your tutoring group, but included in your tutoring group as a community group, right? Then mediate for underpreparedness of students is that we know not all our students, not all your students in your class, in your group, will be at a level that they can easily engage with the content. Not all your students will have the skills that they need. It also means that some of your students may lack that skills that they need. So your duty is to prepare the students to engage with the content and the competencies that they need, right? Cater for diverse student needs. Now here as well, colleagues, you'll find in the next few units, we will unpack how students learn with different learning styles. Mean that some students learn through visual, some students learn through audio, some students learn through text, right? Which means, now watch this very carefully, colleagues, is that when you design your tutoring elements cannot just be text-based, because if your tutoring elements are simply text-based, writing on your learning management platform with no videos, and this is why you see we integrate videos, we integrate audio as part of the course, is that then you're only catering for a student who can understand, read, and learn text. That's it. This is why even in your tutoring, you need to think of students that have different learning styles and how you can bridge the tutoring space with rich multimedia, podcasts, videos, etc. Richard will unpack some of these things as part of his training on how you could build some of these things. For example, creating a video using just your computer with some of open software, uploading on a YouTube channel, creating your own YouTube channel. We'll also run through how you could create podcasts and put it on a podcast channel, for example, and use that as well. So think about this, colleagues. The role of the tutor is not just text-based. It's much more than. It is bringing a rich accumulation of multimedia into your space and developing that learning, right? Each E-Tutor is expected to facilitate the following. Facilitate online delivery of tutorial material, which is provided by the academics to you. Manage the students' learning experience online. Facilitate students' interaction with the peers online, and provide students with academic and technical support. That's your role. That's what we expect you to do as a tutor. Now let's unpack this role. You got 9 elements here in this table, right? The first one is they act as a first point of contact. And I'm stressing this there, colleagues, is that when you are grouped with your students, you actually the face of Unisa right at that point, because they don't go to their academics first. You've already created and will sustain a relationship with your tutors, which means that you will immediately have that academic first point of contact with your students, right? So you literally are the face of this university with your students. Second point is that you will facilitate student interaction with the study material, right? So that means you will then guide your students through interacting with the study process, the study materials, etc. The third one is to facilitate and moderate discussion among students. When we say facilitate and facilitate discussions, that means you are creating environments in which your students can discuss the study material. Now, don't worry about all these things. We will show you exactly how this is done as we unfold the next 4 weeks, three to 4 weeks, right? Moderate. Now, why we say moderate? Colleagues, working in an online environment is very different from working in a class environment. You find that in online environments, from your own experiences in WhatsApp groups, Facebooks, there might be a lack of etiquette, what we call netiquette, in online environments, which means that you might get students that can be very dominant in terms of how they respond. You might also get students that can dominate a conversation and not give anybody else an opportunity to speak in these conversations. It's your role to moderate those things, to make sure that every student has an equal space to participate in these spaces, right? Now this is, we'll be building building these competencies as part of the process as we unfold. Remember, the study unit 01 is simply to put up the basic orientation for you, right? Then respond to concerns, queries, and questions from students. And obviously, there are some concerns and questions that you might not be able to answer. For example, specific content-related aspects, you would then need to direct it, right? Pedagogical role means that you then bring in the teaching aspect as part of it, which is part of a tutoring role, and we will unpack what the tutoring approaches are. Offer further explanation of difficult concepts. So for example, if you're teaching a course and you know there's a particular concept that your students in your group are simply not getting, you should then build up a resource to unpack that concept for the students. I'm not talking about designing new definitions of the concept. I'm talking about a resource such as, if the student doesn't understand what ODEL means, do a video presentation. Unpack it through, for example, a PowerPoint or whatever it is. So this is part of unpacking concepts that you will use. Guide students to further reading and sources for information where needed, but that's also done in consultation with your academics. Provide feedback on tasks and activities. Remember, you also will have a feedback role, which means that when you design, for example, an activity on understanding what ODEL means, I can't just design an activity and say, go to discussion forum 1 and discuss what ODEL means. The students can go to discussion forum 1, discuss what ODEL means, but that doesn't help the student to know that they're on the right track, which means that there must be a level of feedback that must be provided as well, right? And we will show you how to automate feedback, but also to provide individual feedback as well. The last one for me is very important, is monitor progress of the students. We don't want students to be left behind, colleagues. Is that this is part of the reason why we ask you to come in and provide an additional level of support. Is we want you to monitor the progress of the students. We want you to work with your students. We want you to identify those students that are weak, those students that need additional help, and redirect them to places that they can get additional help. So for example, if you know there's a student that is simply not coping with the digital competencies that they need in your class, that means there are basic things that are lacking. That means we can't continue but without building that skills for that student, or else that student would be simply left behind. So for example, if there is a student that cannot read academically, and when I say read academically, that means reading with a level of comprehension that is equivalent to an academic level of reading. Then that means if you continue tutoring that student and knowing that that student has a deficit, that means you simply allowing that student to fall behind, but you're not building any of the competencies up. Now this is where we come and we ask you to identify student needs. We will teach you how to do this, direct that student to the proper support systems, and then monitor the progress of that student and then bring them back into the support system so that they can function as a properly effective student in that system. So if you look at this entire model, colleagues, it's not to say you're providing a level of support to a group of students that become part of a learning community, inclusive community. Your role as the tutor is content, facilitate the environment, ensure learning takes place. That is a strategic role that we want you to be. Now you may ask why those things, is because at the end of the day, we want you to, the role of the tutor will be to improve student pass rates, to improve student retention in the unit, in the university. Then you also have a social role, right? Social role means that you're not just an artificial intelligence sitting behind the system and providing true or false, this is true, finished. There's a social role. That means that we know our students are social beings. That means personally create a presence, welcoming every student to the course, praise and reinforce good behavior, good progress to our students, encourage interaction and motivate students to actively participate. And in some cases, you might need to insert some humor to break the tension between the students in terms of these environments, right? So this is what we call the social presence. And remember, I told you about social constructivist approach, social presence. Is that your role is, and remember, every human being is a social being. And this is why we want that social element as part of your tutoring, right? Then the managerial role. The managerial role, straight from the word, means to manage the learning process. Manage, provide instructions and schedules. And remember, I told you one of the important things at the earlier part was the ability to manage the learning process as part of your tutorials, right? Sending out regular announcements, similar to what we are doing now, colleagues. Everything that I'm doing as part of this course, for example, sending out announcements, creating spaces for you to engage with, etc., informing students of admin participation, responding to non-academic queries plus academic queries, is exactly what we would like you to replicate in your tutoring sessions, right? So as you are engaging this online course, look at how we are creating these online spaces. Look at how we are working with you as tutors, flexibility, etc., creating social spaces for you to engage, making sure that you are comfortable in spaces. That is what you need to replicate as part of your tutoring experience, right? Then there's also a technical role. So to ensure that students are familiar and confident with using the features of the learning environment, reassure students who are nervous about technology, and remember, colleagues, that the digital competency levels of our students, there are two levels. There are two skills that you would immediately find right at the beginning of your tutoring. One is the digital competency levels of our students are very low at Unisa, right? We've got stats to show that. Our research shows that the level of competencies of our digital competencies are very low, which means that you would need to think in the back of your mind the pace in which you move towards these online spaces, right? You also then need to try to create spaces where you build these competencies up, right? And we have a lot of OERs, MOOCs that you can use and direct your students to build these competencies up. The second challenge that you're going to find is the academic skills. Academic skills in reading and writing amongst our students are very low. That means that the pace of which our students read and understand. Now, when I'm saying read, it means reading the academic content, understanding the academic content, and then being able to respond to questions of it is very low amongst our students, right? So it means that you need to immediately position yourself in an environment where we have low digital competency rates, low academic literacy rates, right? So when you are engaging with these colleagues, in the back of your mind, I'm stressing this, please remember these two variables that would define your student profile and define how you engage with this. Now, as you start engaging with your classes, when you are allocated your classes by your colleges, whenever that is, you will find that those two variables will start coming out quite strongly, right? But we have mechanisms that are in place to ensure that we can provide those skills to those students, right? Then e-tutoring online, etc. Right? The role of the e-tutor is an activity to unpack what is the role of the e-tutor, so you can look at it. So what is the difference between teaching and tutoring? We stress this a lot. So one of the things that we don't want you to, and this is the problem that we have, is teaching takes place with the academics, right? Academics develop the content. So you will receive content, teaching content from your academics, your primary lecturers. That content which was developed went through a very rigid process of curriculum development. The added emphasis here that I want to is when we design content, we take into consideration credits. So for example, a 12 credit course, we take into account what are the learning outcomes of those courses. We also take into consideration the notional study hours for those courses. So that means a 12 credit should be equivalent to an average of 120 notional hours. Now, why are we stressing that your role is a tutoring role is you do not design content. And I'm stressing this. You simply work with the content that the academic gives you, whether it's your prescribed book, your study guides, etc. You familiarize yourself with that content, and then you tutor that content. Because the moment you start giving additional readings, additional whatever it is, but it's additional to that. That means there's a concept on ODEL, but you don't use the reading that is prescribed by the academic. You give additional readings. What's going to happen is it's going to lead to confusion, firstly. Secondly, it's going to lead to added work on the student in terms of notional study hours. So the role is to tutor. Tutor means coaching, an element of teaching, but not teaching as in developing new content. Coaching, mentoring, monitoring, and mediating the packaged learning materials and the learning process. And I like the word mediating because you serve as an interim between the academic and the student, and you mediate the learning process, which means that's your role, to mediate the learning process. So you can find, for example, you will find that the academic may say, okay, study unit 1, we talk about designing ODEL, and I get defining open distance e-learning, and I give you all this content. You simply then will mediate the learning process through discussion forums, through activities, through videos, and breaking down the content into manageable sizes for your students to digest and get the learning across. Okay, that's your role, colleagues. Facilitate, mediate the learning process. Your role is to assist the tutor, to assist the lecturer in their responsibilities. Okay, so this, colleagues, was basically gave you a good understanding of study unit 1. The role of the tutor, defining what your role of the tutor is, what your role of an e-tutor is. E-tutor, online tutor, right? At Unisa, and how we see your role. Now, this study unit, colleagues, what I want you to go is go back and read this content throughout, right? It's very fast reading, but understand it, right? And think about some of the elements that I meant about challenges, etc., right? And once you finish, you've got this grounding. We're now then going to build on this in our next session and next week on the pedagogical approaches for tutoring, right? Now, your first assignment. So at the end of every session, colleagues, these study units, you'll find I give you assignments, right? So your assignment 1, colleagues, is quite simple. I want you to discuss the concept of transactional distance, right? Remember, I spoke about this. Transactional distance is the distance where education takes, transactional meaning where education is taking place, the learning process is taking place. But distance implies geographical distance, etc., right? So for this assignment, you need to read Moore's article, the 1997 article on theory of transactional distance, right? That's the first art. The second article is prescribed reading. Read the article. It's a prescribed reading for the study unit. And then between 750 and 1,000 words. That's all we want, between 750 and 1,000 words. If you exceed it, it's fine, colleagues. You're not going to be penalized. Why we put in 750,000 words is because we want you to reach that amount of words. We don't want 50 words or 60 words because it's pointless to give you a mark for those, right? So 750 to 1,000 words. The assignment contributes 10 points towards your final mark. It's compulsory for the activity. 10 points towards your final mark comes from this assignment, right? The assignment must be submitted using the link below. Remember, please also submit using the link because it then allows us to mark and grade you online. You can paste your answer directly in the forum as well or upload it as an attachment. So whichever one you feel more comfortable for, either way, we will be able to mark it online. Right? In the forum title, simply put assignment 1. If you put in your name or anything of that sort, it's fine. Don't worry about it, right? Please, colleagues, what we want you to do is to start thinking. Write in your own words. Do not simply provide a summary of Moore and say Moore says 1, 2, 3. We want you to discuss the concept. We want you to think about what transactional distance means, because that transactional distance concept is the foundation of what it means to be in a distance learning institution, understanding the challenges, understanding the profile of student, all those elements come into play. Copying the answers of your fellow participants will result in 0. Remember, colleagues, we read every single thing. So if you are simply copying the answers of your fellow participants, it's very easy to find out. And I must actually say this as well, colleagues. You are all at a higher level than our students, right? And you're providing a level of student support to our students, which means our students would mimic the type of behavior that you have. Now, this is actually very disappointing for me and sad for me, but I'm giving you this as an example. Last year, we had our bootcamp in November, and we had one tutor that decided to pay somebody to do their assignments. They went and found some service online, emailed the person all the assignments, and then told him, I will pay you X amount, some service, and complete the assignments and submit it back to the institution. First assignment, second assignment, the student submitted, we didn't know anything. The third assignment, the student decided to become very clever and told this particular person, I'm not paying you for the work that you're doing because I don't feel it up to standard. That person emailed the entire institution, emailed us on the tutor development program, emailed all the disciplinary committees, emailed the vice chancellor, emailed the college deans with evidence of the conversation happening with that particular tutor, and then submitting as evidence all the work that they submitted. We then looked at the work that was provided by this particular person for that tutor, and we found that it is the exact same submission, and we simply kicked the tutor out of the system and flagged that student for unethical behavior. That tutor is not allowed to come back into the system and do anything. So, colleagues, the idea here, colleagues, is that we want to ensure good practice, and this is why we're saying that there's no wrong answer. If we find, colleagues, that your work, if you find that your that your answer is not 100% right, we don't give you 0 points. We simply say, go back and improve it. The idea, colleagues, is simply to do your best, work to the content. Remember, we are here not to penalize you and fail you. We are here to build your competencies so that when you get out of this course, you're working at an optimum level that we want you to engage with in the environment. right? So think of us, myself, Richard, and whoever else works as part of this commit of this team. We'll have some guest people coming in as well. Colleagues, we are here to guide you through the process, to build your competencies, to ensure that you work effectively within the system. And if you have any challenges, please feel free. The WhatsApp group, text us, email us, whatever we are here to assist you through the process. That is simply our ultimate. We are facilitating you through this online course. We are guiding you through the process. We want to ensure learning takes place. Right? Note that as a formal assessment, please follow the traditional essay conventions. You need to have an introduction, body, conclusion, references. Now, this for us is the last part is quite important, is that you must reference all the sources that you use. Even if you're just using one source, please reference that source because it shows good academic practice, right? So that's what you need to do for us, colleagues. Okay, so that is your assignment, colleagues. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about assignment dates, and then I'm going to give Richard some time to talk a little bit about the technical aspects that he may want you to familiarize yourself with on the platform as you go on, right? Richard, you can get ready for that in the meantime. Just a few minutes on the technical aspects that you found challenges on and how you want the colleagues to navigate the platform. You can share your screen as well, Richard. So colleagues, the last part is that you note that I do not give you due dates for each assignment. And the reason why I am not giving you due dates for each assignment is simply because I know that some of you will be working at your own pace. I know that some of you know that this is a 4-week bootcamp, but you may work during the weekends with some of your course materials because you are working or work after hours. That is understandable, colleagues. It's absolutely understandable, and we are flexible with that. All from our side we are saying is all assignments must be submitted at least by the latest 22nd of April. If you have maybe need a few days extra, we can always talk about that right later on. But try towards the 22nd of April to submit all your assignments. You will then submit all your assignments 1, 2, 3, 4, and your portfolio of 5 assignments, right? We will start grading as soon as your assignments come in. We start marking, right? So by 22nd April, we want all your submissions in. And the reason why we say by 22nd April, remember, colleagues, that you're all here because some of you have been identified by your colleges as tutors, right? So for those that have been identified by the college as tutors, when you finish the course, right? Once you finish the course, you will then be given a successful completion. We will then give your names to your colleges. The college will then allocate you a group. They will give you a contract and allocate you a group based on the number of students in that course, right? And when they give you that group, you will then be working with a specific group. So the idea here is for you to think of time, because this will be specifically for this year. They want you to be equipped, skilled, and get out of the system so that you can start tutoring this year, colleagues. So it means, remember, Unisa's term starts, we move to a super semester. So it means semester 1, semester 2 is combined. So that means you will then start engaging with us, right? So please, 22nd April, worst case, if you need a little bit extra time, we will try to accommodate you and give you a little bit extra time. But we want as much people as possible to get out of the system and then start tutoring and providing that strategic support that the colleges need. Okay. Let me give Richard an opportunity to quickly run through some of the technical things that you might want you to familiarize yourself with. And then thereafter, we'll open up the session for about 5 minutes for any questions. Richard?
Okay, everyone. So I'm just quickly going to give you a brief overview of some of the aspects that we picked up in the chats and also just how to get started very quickly. So the first thing, after you created your account and you logged in and you joined, remember, especially on mobile phones, everything is compressed. So you'll have to go on the sites to go and access the how can I say, the project for, or the project site for the basic e-tutoring. If you're on a desktop, you can also click on the star next to the name of the site, and this will then actually make it appear in your top navigation bar. So it's just easier to access, especially that you don't always have to click on the sites menu. Now, when you're on a mobile phones, the site is compressed. So to get to these, if you click on the site, for instance, to get to the different study units, you have to click on the tools icon. And this will actually give you the drop down to quickly navigate between the different tools. One of the things that we picked up as well was, or let me rather say it this way, you use the left navigation to as your main navigation. In the, for instance, the orientation, there was a problem with the link at the bottom. So if you clicked on that link, it told you perhaps that you don't have access for that specific site, but that is now been fixed. So you should be able to click on this. So if you got that error while you were actually starting out, that was actually linked to a different site, but we fixed it now so it navigates to the main site. But if you have any issues with the link at the bottom, you can always still use the main navigation on the left-hand side, or if you're on a phone, just click on the tools and click on the study unit that you want to navigate to. So one of the big things is the data. Now, the MOOC platform is it's built back to the university, so accessing the MOOC site is for free. Any content that's on the MOOC platform in terms of documents that's been uploaded to here where the link actually says it goes to MOOC will also not use any of your data. But embedded videos such as this video that's on YouTube, or in the activities such as Study Unit 1, where you have to go and do your reading, for instance. If you click, for instance, here on uol.de, that takes you outside of the Unisa domain, so that you won't be built back, so that will use data. So remember, YouTube videos, all the embedded YouTube videos, and any documents that you access that's not on the Unisa domain will actually cost you data. The same with when you join with Microsoft Teams. That's also outside of Unisa. That's run by Microsoft. So that's also not built back. And then later on, if you start e-tutoring, you'll see a lot of students, they start using Microsoft 365 services. That is also currently not built back. That also use the data from the actual individual. So if you to browse on the MOOC site, you can do it on your mobile phone. This you won't use any data, but as soon as you click or to play a video, or you go and visit one of these external sites to go and read up about the topic, then you will use the data from there. The data is not that much because most of it is text-based to go and read the articles. YouTube does use a little bit more, but it is found to be the platform that uses the least amount of data. Then from there on, just also a quick reminder, if you use the forums and you post a topic, remember to attach your files at the bottom, preferably in PDF format, just to make it easier for marking. But also we'll just convert it on our side. So, but as Denzel mentioned, you can answer it in the forum itself, or if you do attachments, rather do it in PDF format, where you can just quickly export it. I think that's all I want to cover for today. So I'll give it over to Denzel for questions.
Thanks so much, Richard. Much appreciated. I think those technical aspects actually help your colleagues as you progress with this. Richard, can we open up the mics for the colleagues? And then colleagues, okay, so all you need to do is on the top right, you'll see raise your hand. So if you simply click on your raise hand, and I'll give you the floor. Once Richard opens up the mics. Thanks, Richard. I see there's two colleagues with a question. I see first on my screen is Paul Lamisa. Have you got a question? So you simply unmute yourself, Paul, and then you can talk. Okay, while we're waiting for Paul, can I move on to the next one? Sikonyana?
Hello, yes, good evening, evening, Denzel and Richard.
Thanks.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Sikonyana, thanks, you can carry on.
Okay, no, thank you. My question, I think I've also raised it in the chat, but I can see that you didn't come back to it. I wanted to check about the activities. These activities are also compulsory or are not compulsory?
No, they're not compulsory. Okay, so as I said, because we reduced, remember, the activities were compulsory when we had the 8 to 10 weeks, because you had sufficient time to complete it, right? So we
Okay.
ensured that the activities were compulsory. Now, because we reduced the course to 4 weeks, we said those are learning activities which you can do on your own as part of your learning process. All I want, colleagues, all I want, colleagues, in terms of those activities is the 3 activities. The baseline assessment must be completed. At the end of the course, you'll then find the post-assessment and the evaluation of the course that you can do at the end of course. Only those 3 activities, colleagues, if you can complete that, because we need that statistics. The rest of the activities, if you have time, please do, because it builds up towards your assignments. But it is not compulsory. The only compulsory elements that I have, as I said, is those 3 assigned activities and then your assignments and portfolio. That's all, Sukanya.
3 activities you refer to those that are in study unit 0, the one that we introduce ourselves, and what study unit is this?
No.
The one that we were just teaching now.
Yeah, the 3 activities I want you to complete, which is compulsory. The baseline activity, right?
Oh, okay.
Where you complete the baseline activity. And right at the end of the course, the last unit of the course, you'll find the post-assessment and the course evaluation. Remember, you can only do those 2 activities when you finish the course that's a 4th week. So you can't do that now. Those are the only 3 that I want you to complete. The rest of the activities you can use as your own learning, reflective learning activities.
Okay, no, thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. Okay, next one we have Sinalo. Sinalo.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Thanks, Sinalo. Floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much for the very informative session, Denzel. I have a question with regards to the portfolio. I went through the site and I understand that it's basically an application of our knowledge in which we will have gained throughout the course. I just need clarity as far as the topic. Do I choose anything? Because I am, for example, a conflict major. So do I choose something that I'm very comfortable with whilst applying the skills and theories I've learned throughout the course?
That's exactly what you need to do. We don't define for you or prescribe for you. You work on whatever is best for you and how you can work with that. So it works for you. And as I said, you build on whatever your expertise is, your area is, what you're comfortable with, and then you apply those things. Remember, as you said, right, the portfolio is application based, and that you use that space to apply. We don't prescribe to you. If you're comfortable with an X amount of elements that you want to work with, please go ahead on that.
Okay, thank you. I do have one last question.
Sure.
Because you shared a whole lot of information, I was wondering, as far as flexibility is concerned, when it comes to the tutoring times, we're now assuming that we have successfully completed the course and met the expectations of the institutions. Are we then going to be allocated time slots, or will a tutor be allowed to indicate a time which will be suitable for them and which will be more conducive for learning when it comes to flexibility around tutorial times?
Thanks. Actually, we don't prescribe that, Sanala. What happens with that is that, remember, once we finish, sorry to work, colleagues, is once we finish with you and build a capacity, we then send your names to the colleges. The colleges will then work with you specifically on how they see your tutoring unfolding. But there is much flexibility. I don't think there is any predefined to say you must be on between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock or something of that sort. There's an understanding that you will be required to do X amount of things for the week, and then they evaluate you on what you've done. But I think that's where the flexibility comes in, is how you then accommodate students and how you work with the students. But each college will then guide you on that. So I think let's wait for the colleges, but there is flexibility in that. So you don't have to worry about the fact that, that I'm not going to be available at that time, will it work against me? I think it's a very flexible environment when it comes to that. But let's wait for the colleges to define that for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Okay, next one I've got here is Keta. The floor is yours.
Hello, thanks, Denzel. Hi, it's Keta. My question is regarding the submission of the assignments. I saw that once you have submitted the assignment, it depends how soon you are available, you can almost grade the assignment immediately. How many chances have we got? Can I resubmit option 2 if I'm not happy with the grading or the marks that I got for the first revision that I submitted?
Okay, because it is so because I mean we're running with 4 weeks and we've got 300 participants. 300 times 5 is 1,500 assessments to mark. It's a lot. So if we accommodate everybody and we say just resubmit, it'll be a lot to mark and we may not meet our deadline timeframes. If you do very bad, that means if we find that the mark is really bad and you can improve it, then we would allow for you to resubmit. If you feel that you have a strong argument to say, can I resubmit? We will gladly accept that. But we don't want to make it a blanket rule, and then we find that everybody comes back and say, my mark is too bad, I want to resubmit. Then we will be sitting with much more than what we anticipate in marking, and then it will affect our timelines. But we will be flexible, colleagues. If you find that your mark is too bad or too low and you want to improve it, you're more than welcome to just say, please, can I do this? And we will be flexible with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, we've got Paul Lamisa. Paul, the floor is yours. Paul, you can just unmute. I think Paul seems to be having a problem. Can we move on to the next one while we wait for Paul? Tony?
A question which is slightly off tangent. I wanted to ask about the discussions. Like what is the role of the tutor with the discussions? Are we there to monitor and regulate that students aren't swearing at each other or anything, or do we have just a role to facilitate and open the space for them? I asked this because I remember that I saw something, I think, on the Code of Honor about the discussions not being reflective of the university at all. So yeah. I just wanted to get a word on that.
Thanks, Tony. So your role is actually two for both. One of the skills that we will show you is right at the beginning, similar to what we have as a Code of Honor, is the Honor Code. Is you will then, before you even start your tutorials, define what happens in the discussion forum. So, for example, in this particular course, we already have the Honor Code right at the beginning. That means if any of our participants go against that Honor Code, it allows us to remove them from the discussion forum. Right? So it means if there are racist slants or abusive languages, that gives us the ability to say that we've got the Honor Code, we stated it, you did not comply to it, so we have to remove it. So that is one of the skills that we will teach you as part of the course on how to develop that Honor Code using a similar example to what we have here. But your primary role is twofold, as I said, is you will facilitate the discussions around selective content that is important. And remember, you won't be able to discuss every single thing because you have limited time as well. So you will pick out, and this is where you will work on an e-tutorial plan to identify areas that need to be tutored, work on that with your students, discuss it as part of discussions, ensure that the discussions is taking place, that it's fair space, but also ensure that the learning taking place is proper learning, right? So those are your roles as part of your tutor roles on this. But it doesn't just stop with discussion forums. You will also go even further to design other activities, which we will show you as well, which can then be like automated MCQs and creating a variety of other teaching learning tools as well. So that'll be part of it as well. So your major role is to ensure that what happens on the space is that the learning process is taking place within a safe environment that allows for flexible learning.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, colleagues, we have Zoleka.
The call. Can you hear me?
Yes, Zoleka, you can go ahead.
Okay. My question is around the fact that we have to complete a course before we are allocated students. And now my concern is the misalignment or the falling behind in terms of the schedule that has been designed by the module lecturers. So, for example, now we have to submit the assignment by 22nd of April. And according to module lecturers' plan, you were supposed to have finished with chapter 1 and chapter 2 by the time we finish the assignment. So that might cause a bit of a rush job to push through to the students, which will be unfair. So I have concern. I have concern around that area.
Zuleika, you are 100% correct with that concern. It's been a major issue for us. Now, remember, Zuleika, that before we could move into a super semester at Unisa and combine, we had already prepared X amount of tutors in November, December. Those November, December tutors that we prepared would have been adequate enough to cater for first semester this year, with the idea that those tutors would have then came into the system and started with the system as per the schedule of the university and moved on. We wouldn't have. The environment is not the norm that we are working with now. It has shifted completely into a triple semester, which means that we have combined semester 1 and semester 2, which means we need to also increase the number of tutors in part of the system. This is why we moved immediately into this intervention of the 4-week bootcamp to try to push out as much tutors as we can in the next 4 weeks, so we close the gap of the lack of number of tutors in the system. Now, obviously, as you rightfully pointed out, it will mean that the students are already 2 weeks or 3 weeks into their course content. It means that you then need to adjust, and the academics will then guide you on this process to adjust to accommodate that time deficit. So it will be an adjustment with that. I think the academics that you work with, once they start linking you and your college, will have to guide you on that. There's no a one-size-fits-all or a blanket decision on this, because remember, it's the colleges and the academics that will guide you through how you catch up with that particular time, with a time deficit, because it will also then mean an alignment of your tuition with the assessments, etc., that the academics have set up as well. Yeah, thanks, Zuleika.
Okay, thank you. I have a meeting with the module lecturer on Wednesday, so I will also raise that point as well. Thank you.
Perfect. I think that's best. Thanks, Zuleika. Kenneth. Kenneth? Okay, I think Kenneth can unmute, please.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity, and hi to everyone. I just have a few questions I needed to ask with regards to the assignment submission. And earlier in your discussion, you have mentioned that plagiarism is one of those things that you hold with high esteem, and it should not be encouraged. Now, my question revolves around submitting on the platform, which is the forum, where you have to click on the forum, and then there is a certain link that you have to click on, and then you submit your assignment. Now, when you submit it, do you think I will not be able to access the files should in case I have a different, maybe my fellow colleagues, do you think they will not be able to access it when we do that in that type of platform?
Access as in copy your answers?
Yeah, I mean like reproduce what we have submitted simply because, yes, I mean like a reproduction. Yes. Can you hear?
Yeah. No. Yes, that is one of the reasons why when we are marking, we actually look at those elements. If they are copied, and as I warned, because we've seen this before that some colleagues actually try to do that, you will immediately receive a 0% colleagues. There's one thing that we do not, and as I said earlier, we cannot compromise on, is the integrity of your learning process as part of this course. Is that if you are part of it, we cannot allow you to go into a tutoring class and then replicate some of these behaviors. This is why we are very, very particular. And we make sure, remember, as well as I said, that this is a DED project, which means everything is auditable. When we start allocating certificates, etc., the mark that we allocate must be warranted for that particular things. And this is why our marking is very, very stringent. We've reduced the work, we've reduced the amount of work on it. We will mark in detail, reading every single sentence that you write to make sure that it's up to standard, but also that you're not copying from other participants. So yes, we've taken note of that, and we put mechanism in place when we are marking to follow and ensure that.
All right, thank you so much. And I think I have too much to just go before I leave the forum. I just wanted to find out, you did mention that we were going to cite from the sources that you have provided to us by the by this site. Okay, so now let's say, for instance, I want to make an argument wherefore I'm comparing a few authors and their views. Do you think I could outsource or get some kind of inputs from other authors just to back up my claims of what I'm saying? Or do I restrict it to just...
No, Kenneth, you remember academic writing includes the integration of other sources as well. So at this level, we actually encourage you to bring in additional sources to support your basis. Remember, the articles that we've prescribed are your foundational articles with the idea that you would also integrate other sources to support or even not support what is being said by these academics. You can argue both ways, but the idea here is whatever sources that you bring in, that you cite them so that we can ensure that they correctly reference.
All right, thank you. The last question, this is just a suggestion actually. I must sincerely say that from the get-go, I love the way you presented the whole discussion thing, but my suggestion is that sometimes it might be time-consuming. I would rather prefer or not to show you or tell you how to run about with the project, but I'm just saying it's just a suggestion. Let's have more of engagements with fellow colleagues as opposed to we having to wait and listen, because while you were doing this, I've noticed that some people were getting in and out, leaving the platform, and I'm thinking that maybe some of them are bored having to listen to us being read, okay, the things being read out to us. I understand that you're trying to give us a concept, and I quite do appreciate it. Okay, but I'm just saying for much time for us to engage more, maybe less of the reading, maybe in terms of summaries, and then we can read in our own times, and then let us use most of this time to just engage in more of the discussions as opposed to the reading out. That is just a suggestion from my side. I don't know how you're gonna take it, but it's just a suggestion from my side.
Okay, so Kenneth, actually you raised a good point. The 2 hours that we have. Okay, so firstly, colleagues, that you know that not all of you on this platform came in on Thursday. Some of you only joined the course today because your colleges only gave us names today. So it wouldn't have been fair for me to create a space with the base of an assumption that everybody knew exactly what was happening in the course. And this is why you found that we had to make sure that we took everybody right from the beginning, navigating to the course, how to create so that everybody can be part of the platform. This is one of the things that I strongly advocate, is no one is left behind in this course, even if it means us ensuring right at the starting that we move with everybody together to get the foundation right. And this was the particular objective for today. Our courses, Kenneth, which we move forward for in terms of study in the week 2, week 3, week 4, you'll see that we have 2 hours. The way we structure this is the 1 hour. The first 1 hour is where we engage with the content. The second hour is where you start bringing the questions so forth. The only reason that we went through this approach today is to ensure that every one of us is on the right foundation and we're on the right track. As we move forward, it's not the same way, colleagues. We assume that you all have read the materials and have come to the course prepared. And when we start discussing, like for example, next week, we don't run through the entire course content. We run through our key aspects, issues that we want to focus on. And the second hour is where we start opening up for discussion. So that's the approach that we use, Kenneth, going forward.
Thank you so much. My suggestions have been answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenneth. Danielle? Danielle, please unmute. Okay, I think Danielle, we have a challenge with. Tato, are you available, Tato?
Can I go? Sorry, I was
Danielle.
just, my computer just was giving me troubles.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for this platform, Denzel. Thank you for the presentation. I think for both of you, Richard did an excellent job. It was thorough. It was straight. It was easy to follow. My question is really like just a minor question, just in terms of us submitting our assignments and us having to reference I'm just wondering, do you have a specific way in which we are required to reference, like in-text referencing, or are we supposed to have like a young, I guess, reference list at the end of the assignment? So I just wanted clarity in terms of that. Is there any particular preferred method for us to reference in-text, or do you want to reference list at the end, or both?
Okay, so it has to, what we actually suggest is the Harvard referencing style, in-text referencing, and a list of references at the end of it. If you feel comfortable with the APA style, that's also fine as well. The main thing is that whatever you put into the text, that you have in-text referencing clearly marked, and you have a list of references at the end. Our preferable style is the Harvard with a reference style at the end of it. But as I said, there are colleges with different disciplines that also use the APA style. That's also fine as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Neil. Tato?
Hi, Denzel. Sorry if I'm going to ask this question again because I got cut a bit. I just wanted to clarify the assignment that's due to be submitted. It's the only one that's at the end of the study unit, right?
Yes, you'll find the assignments at the end of the study unit. So you find assignment 1 at the end of study unit 1, assignment 2 at the end of study unit 2, and it goes on like that. So those are student marked assignments.
All right, the one we submit is the one, the rest we do for ourselves, and the one choose for submission is the only one at the end.
Sorry, Tata. So yes.
No, I'm saying the one to submit is the assignment one at the end, and the activities are just for our own learning.
That's 100% correct, Tata.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Aziza Madisa. Aziza, floor is yours.
Denzel, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Okay. No, actually, some of the things have been responded to by yourself while you were talking to other participants. I would want to maybe reiterate with others to say that I actually enjoyed the lecture, and I think it's because I had gone through some of the stuff that were done, the first assessment, so it was easy to understand you. I did not feel as if it was being read out at all. For me, it was almost like an affirmation of the kinds of things that I had read before. But the one question that I have is about the 4 weeks. Is it possible, because having heard that there might be a clash and there's something about trying to, put speed into it. Is there a possibility of someone saying getting done in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or it is required for us to actually attend these Tuesday sessions for 4 weeks?
The 4 weeks is actually compulsory. The reason why we say 4 weeks compulsory is remember, these webinars are also compulsory where we take registers as well. So it's part of the learning process. And as a colleague said earlier as well, it's also a space for you to engage with each other. So while we want you to work fast, we don't want you to work too fast where you lose out on the engagement with colleagues as well. So that's part of the learning process as well. So that's why we say a minimum of 4 weeks the course is designed for. Thanks, Aziza. Okay, we've got last and up is Sifo Kati. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the session. My question is this course compulsory for all e-tutors, even those who were the e-tutors previously, let's say last year or prior to last year as well, or it is limited to new e-tutors? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so this is a reskilling, right? So, for example, if you're a new tutor, you cannot get into the system before completing this course. If you are an old tutor at Unisa, the colleges have now made this mandatory that all existing tutors that have not completed this reskilling course must complete this course in order to be activated. So both new tutors and tutors who have not completed the course before will be required to complete this course as part of the reskilling process of our tutors to function effectively in Unisa's new ODEL environment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, last and colleagues, I have Gershon, last person.
Good evening, Denzel and colleagues. Thank you very much for the informative and comprehensive presentation, Richard and Denzel. My question just relates to the super semester that you mentioned earlier on. I'm assuming after 22nd of April, will that be running into October? So in other words, is it going to be just 6 months? Or how long? What are your timelines? When is it October, November? I just wanted to get an idea about that. But thank you very much. That's me.
Well, thanks, Gershon. Actually, Gershon, there's a document that's out from the university on the new academic year and the changes that are made. And it's quite a complex one because there's also, remember, they are allowing students that are who are in the final year to also complete a bit earlier. So what I will do, colleagues, I will extract that document because I don't want to put something here and we find it contradicts what the document says. It might be easier that we share that document with all of you so that you see exactly how the university is going to unfold this year, because you may find yourself in a situation where you have students that are completing slightly earlier than planned. Then you may find also yourself in a situation where some academics have, instead of combining it into one semester, are still using two separate sites as well. So what I will do, Gershon, is circulate that document on the academic changes for the year. And I think that will be a good document because it guides you exactly how the semester is going to unfold, when the examination is going to start, when the examination will end, and also what are the interim measures for those that might complete a bit earlier as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gershon. Okay, colleagues, I see there's no other questions, and I know many of you are anxious to hear what the president says as well. So let me quickly ask Richard if he's got any last words, and then we round up. Richard?
Nothing from my side, Denzel. I think we are pretty good to go from here on. I just saw one thing I want to mention is I saw a question on the WhatsApp team is about the passwords. I don't know if you've perhaps got an update on when they will be able to reset their passwords and what is the procedure they must do if they do lose their passwords.
Yeah, colleagues, if you lose your passwords for the MOOCs, for the Unisa Open Learning Platform, ICT is busy working on the reset button for us. So you'll see that there's a reset icon, which should allow you to reset your own password. Unfortunately, at the moment, it is not active, as ICT has mentioned to me, but they're working on it. But at the moment, colleagues, if you forget your password, just drop me an email and I'll reset it for you. It's not a problem. Thanks. Attendance register, colleagues, you don't need to sign any attendance register. Remember that with Teams, Richard extracts the register directly from the site. So as long as you logged onto the site, we can extract your details directly from the site. We also have the recording of today's session, which we will share on the platform itself. Under webinars recordings, you'll find a link to today's date and the recording. So colleagues, from my side, thank you very much. We had a very good attendance today. I see there's quite a lot of participants that attended today. So thank you very much for attending today, and we wish you all well. If you have any questions, colleagues, please feel free to send us on the WhatsApp group or on email, and then we will respond to all your questions as we move forward. So thank you once again, colleagues. Wish you all a pleasant evening and the rest of the week, and also the Easter as well. Please be safe. And we will catch up with you next week, Tuesday, same time, 6 to 8 o'clock for study unit 2. Thanks, colleagues. Good evening. God bless.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
Denzel.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Siyabonga,
Bye, guys.
siyabonga.
Ciao. Asante sana.
you attending class wearing Right, that was a great session. That was a great informative session. You know what? Here's
Oh, let the manga. Yeah, that's a stupid.